that you're on here. Um, I'm Dave Martis, Director of Youth Initiatives for the Michigan Community Service Commission. Most of you perhaps know the Michigan Community Service Commission, the lead organization in the state for volunteerism. And under that umbrella is Mentor Michigan. That's an area that I work closely with. We're the Michigan affiliate of Mentor, the national partnership. And we had the opportunity, funding through Mentor and a partnership they had with the NFL, to put together a project devoted to diversity, equity, inclusion. And Jenna Holmes, our director of the Michigan Community Service Commission, we were discussing this, and Mike Ellison's name kept popping up. So we think the world of Mike. If you attended our summit back in November, December, Mike was kind enough to facilitate that and did a tremendous job. Our relationship goes back a while, and he just is an incredible individual. And we just thought it would be great to put this in his hands. So with no further ado, I guess the quicker he gets to talk and the quicker I go away, the better. So thank you kindly, Mike. We're appreciative. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, David, and thank everybody for joining us. Our goal with all of these fireside chats is to be clear and concise. We know we're probably all a little bit zoomed out and virtual meeting now. So the intent, we have featured speakers for each fireside chat, and you'll see in the chat, I'm going to take them through 6 basic questions and leave the 7th being open for you all to ask them questions and engage with them directly, either through the chat or on camera. The intent, no PowerPoints, no presentations, but just to have a really clear conversation. And I'm taking a page out of the late David Lipton, Inside the Actor Studio, with this format. So with that being said, what we'll do is this. I think you guys have already done it. If you're not speaking just now, you can turn your camera off and mute. We're going to keep Mr. Mayes and Dr. Reed on camera with myself. And then we're going to jump in and we'll follow this format. We'll kind of ping pong back and forth between the two of them and jump right in. And our goal is to keep you all, we're going to stay maybe 30 to 45 minutes tops, but we're not going to keep you long. So with that said, thank you all for joining us for our first fireside, part of the integrated mentoring program. We use that term because you're going to hear from people who have taken an integrated approach to what they do professionally and the way that they serve their respective communities. So with that being said, we've got the illustrious Dr. Cayrn Reed-Hendon, who I'm going to refer to as Dr. Reed today, and my good buddy Kirk Mayes from Forgotten Harvest. Dr. Reed is with Lawrence Tech. And so I will start with Dr. Reed. And so what I'm going to ask you first, if you don't mind, Dr. Reed, just tell us what you do and who you do it for.
Okay. So hi, everybody, and thank you for being here. So I'm going to give the short answer to what it is that I do. So while my position is Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, what I do is I support students, faculty, and staff in their personal and professional development as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, and you do that with Lawrence Technological University in Southfield, Michigan.
Yes, I've been with Lawrence Tech. In October, it'll be 3 years.
Okay, and Mr. Mayes, what do you do and who do you do it for?
Thanks for having me, and welcome everybody to this amazing experience. It's an honor to present in front of you. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Forgotten Harvest, Metro Detroit's food rescue organization. The organization works to capture available fresh food items from the immediate and local food ecosystem and get it to people in need. My job every day is to help lead a team of 90 incredible people to affect our mission here in Southeast Michigan, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County. And we're all doing that to serve people who are in need of the service and the products that Forgotten Harvest is able to get their hands on, fresh food for families in need in Southeast Michigan. So we're here to work for the vulnerable populations in Michigan, families who are under-resourced, don't have enough income to get jobs, food on the table sometimes. And the affected populations from those, like the supported people in those homes, as well as children and a lot of seniors in need. My everyday is, keeping people who are better than me at what they do, kind of focusing on like the same target. While so many winds of change happen on a regular basis, making sure that as the ground seems like it's moving from under us, we still are pointing at the same North Star. So ensuring that the vision is in place, ensuring that the team is rowing with the same energy and focus, and making sure that there's a person that's a face and a source of accountability for our community and our governance, to make sure we're doing the right thing.
And so you both kind of answered our first two questions, and I think I know you both well enough to answer your why, but I will give you a chance to obviously explain to our listeners why you do what you do. I want to point out, however, that there's an interesting cross-section between education and food often being the biggest impediment to learning for people in the populations that many of us on this call serve. So with that being said, Dr. Reed, if you could share with us why you do what you do.
So the main reason that I do what I do and why I do it is because I am interested in making sure that the professions in science, technology, engineering, and math actually reflects the communities in which they're a part of. Prior to my coming to Lawrence Tech, I also served in the same role at Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. And in that same space, I was committed to bringing along young minds that normally, for whatever reason, for whatever circumstance, wouldn't allow them to look at medicine as a possibility for their education or their career. And at the time when I was there, that's when I became a parent. I wanted to make sure that my daughter, whenever I took her to see a dentist or a dermatologist or, or even going into emergency medicine for whatever reason, because, children, I wanted her to be able to see individuals that looked like us, that were in her sphere of influence, so that she can see that becoming a physician, if that's what she chose, was a possibility. So the same thing goes for now being here at Lawrence Tech. I want those young minds that happen to come from underserved populations or underrepresented populations to see themselves in being a part of the science, technology, engineering, and math, whether that is becoming a mathematician, becoming a civil engineer or an architect, becoming a chemist or a biologist or a physicist. There should be no reason that our young people aren't able to see themselves in those spaces. So I work really, really hard to make sure that they can see themselves and see those pathways as a possibility for their future.
Fantastic. Mr. Mayes, why do you do what you do?
It's interesting. I do what I do because I really just want to help people. That's the bottom line. I started my path in service in Metro Detroit, and specifically in the Detroit community, with a intent to just pour all the gifts, talents, experience, and abilities that I was gifted into something that will leave a legacy of service to the people in my community that I grew up with. And I just been continuously asking myself the question, like, where can I add the most value in the open and ongoing challenges that we collectively are experiencing? And that attitude and kind of a disposition of service has put me, as well as a can do and get up and go attitude, has put me in places where I've really been able to serve from multiple points of view within the community. And in some ways, it just so happens that when the opportunity came about to serve at Forgotten Harvest, I was one of the people who were given a chance to be considered. And I was successfully able to, convince them to give me a shot at serving in this way. But in many ways, I see myself much like, a Deion Sanders or a Bo Jackson. I'm a good servant athlete. I could do whatever, what I'm saying, you put me in front of, and my natural willingness, and some of the God-given gifts and talents to learn things quickly and that kind of stuff, with the attitude of just really wanting to help people sincerely, has been able to serve me well to get where I am today.
And I want to dovetail on that point as I go into the next question, to pick up where you left off, and that is, how do you do what you do? How do you do it? So it's kind of a two-part question for you, Kirk, because there's the organization in terms of how you get food to the people who need it most. And you touched on it a little bit as a leader, as a servant leader. How do you do what you do? Yeah. Because you mentioned being a good athlete. I hope everybody's familiar with Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders, but they are multi-sport athletes. And so what Kirk is saying is that, he's good at many things, and then he just humbly goes where he's needed as a leader. But how do you do it as an organization? And how do you do it as a servant leader? Because when you're a CEO of a large organization like Forgotten Harvest, that comes with a lot of responsibility, and you have a public profile that impacts the work you do there.
Yeah. So my greatest asset in that regard, I probably would say, would be patience and humility. Recognizing that there's always an urgency for production of impact in the space that I'm in. But, you can't do any of this stuff without actually people, and you're affecting people, right? So because I'm empowered to actually set the tone and the direction that we actually implement our mission in, I also can go as far as like trying to affect the way that the point of view and the perspective that the organization actually approaches how we serve people, right? So when you ask me like how I do my job, it's people first, right? So when we got to a place where I was oriented enough about Forgotten Harvest, knew how to run everything, how the switches and bells and everything, really operated, the question was like, okay, how can we become the best Forgotten Harvest that we can be? Addressing this idea that we need to not like worry about competing against anyone or anything else. Like the God-given mission that we have is actually big enough. So what do we need to do? And the next step to that was, how does that actually translate itself as we think about who we are to the people we serve? And once that became a driving principle and force in the organization, it changed the conversation about what impact means. And, for me, how I lead is based off of vision. Like, let's identify a place where we want to go. And then I rely on people who I think are the types of experts and professionals that can come next to us and build a team to help us get there. I'm not as much of a micromanager on how we actually get there, but I'm very specific on the what, as long as it's focused on like the impact and the actual reaction that we get from people that we serve. That's going to be our ultimate litmus test, right? So my leadership style is very people oriented, not only when I think about how we make impact, but also on a day-to-day basis when I think about how do you actually inspire, motivate, and deal with the ups and downs that human beings go through every day in order to do this, so that we can actually do something and like have a result that's bigger than all of us, right? I hope that answers your question, brother.
No, it does, because you said something very specific. How they react is your litmus test, and I think a lot of folks on this platform with us work in these spaces where we have metrics, the always present metrics, and we measure things. We have these terms like touches and impressions or what have you, but you're talking about a tangible human reaction that reminds you of what you do and why you do it. Cayrn, Dr. Reed, for folks that don't know, Cayrn is also a personal friend of mine, and so I go back and forth with calling her Cayrn and Dr. Reed and call it Mr. Mayes and Kirk, but Dr. Reed, how do you serve, and how does that tangible human response impact the work that you do?
So I was thinking about that as you were talking, Kirk, and you're right that that tangible observance that I get from a student being successful, or faculty members having the aha moment, like those are the things that I really relish, and even more so when those individuals, can reach back and do the same for someone else that I did for them. So that lets me know that I'm making an impact. And it is really exciting for me to watch the scores of students become what they set out to become. That is exciting. That is exciting. I used to joke with some of my former medical students and say, I want you to know I'm building my own personal health teams. I got myself a dermatologist, I got a cardiologist, I got an anesthesiologist, because I know that you all are thinking about the whole spectrum of my humanity, not just my symptoms, right? And same thing goes with being here at Lawrence Tech. I depend on my colleagues to help me to do my job. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is very much so a very collaborative and integrative area of work and learning. And all of those things are important. I've often said on a number of different occasions in different places and spaces that DEI is everyone's job. And our main job is to make sure that when people are coming to our campus, they feel valued, they feel respected, and they feel welcome.
Yes.
So I have to think about things like language that's put in our mission and our vision and our values. I have to think about how we deal with bias on campus, whether it's how we make sure that people feel that they're seen because of the multitude of nationalities that are on our campus. If there's enough accessibility for people in and around campus. I have to think about all of those things because it's not just about the output graduates, but that it becomes very cyclical in how people come to learn about Lawrence Tech, engage with Lawrence Tech, potentially donate to the institution, because they can see the output is great and grand. But that's because everyone is working at it collectively, and it's not a job of two people trying to influence the university. So that's the how of what I do and how I do. I have great respect for my program coordinator, who often takes my ideas and makes them tangible. I have a great respect for students that are also doing this good work in their organizations and in the classroom. I'm excited to have faculty members, be they department heads, chairs, faculty senate, etc., that are taking DEI seriously in their roles because they understand, they have a clear understanding of how history has often negated possibilities for individuals because others wanted to preserve power in one space. And I'm just happy to have that kind of support.
You just said something that's really key. I want to put this in the chats. You said history has negated possibilities.
Yes, for some people.
For some people, for many, and
for many.
I'm putting that in the chat because that is a quotable. And you also mentioned language, and I want to pick up on that to kind of transition into the next question surrounding challenges. This grant that we're working under that David described at the top, a lot of it is coming out of the repercussions of what we all witnessed with the murder of George Floyd, and the country having a reckoning about communities and what is lacking and what's needed and what some root causes are. So we're looking beyond what we all saw on camera. And
Mhm.
so now you find that in the lexicon of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there are institutions and there are places where it is part of the DNA of the organization now, and it means tangible results. There are other places where it's ambiguous language. We use words like hope and change. Well, for you, you can't tell a child, I hope you graduate. And Kirk, you can't say, well, I hope you eat today. There's very tangible results to what you all do. What are your challenges? You both take joy out of these personal interactions. However, you are in organizations where funding or support is directly tied to metrics and numbers, and they're measuring impact in ways that you guys aren't. Are you saying that you do have those same metrics to meet? However, the personal interaction is what gives you the energy and driving force behind it? Or is meeting these metrics part of your challenge in the work that you do? And I'll start with you, Kirk.
Well, from my point of view, I came to this space, as a very different type of character than a lot of the people that are, nationally running organizations of this kind and size, all of that, right? So, coming from like being a brother and being one of the few like Black people, period, that's running this type of organization, coming from a position where I was on the ground, like literally as an organizer, working with people every day that were affected by the needs. I had a lot of questions about some of the apprehension and some of the lack of depth in using data for our day-to-day decision making. So, and I felt like some of the, because of the magnitude of the problem and the complexities of pushing back on trying to solve the problem, a lot of the funding has been like, just like, here, just fix it, right? And I've been asking the question like, yo, have we been really looking at the right data points in order to really actually fix it, right? So I would actually say that my point of view is I've been actually pushing to add tension on the outside of that question, saying like, everybody needs to actually start measuring ourselves in a more diligent and deliberate way about how we do this. Otherwise, there's this lack of sincerity, in my opinion, about us going out here every year saying we're trying to end hunger or this like big dramatic like phrase, right? So I feel like I'm in command of what the data actually tells, how the data tells a story in the impact space, in our space. That goes for with the funders as well, because I'm having conversations with them where I'm saying, yo, I want you to see us as an accountability partner. But also I want you to see us as a partner in making this stuff happen. And there's some additional data I want to bring to the table so we can start thinking about our work in a different way. That like changes the pressure of that whole conversation in a contextual way. And no funder is like, oh, you can help us learn, and be like, no, and you're already funding me, right? So
Right.
I don't think of it that way. I think of it much more. I think what I heard Dr. Reed say, there's a difference between when somebody has accomplished something and when they haven't accomplished it yet, and there's a whole journey along the way. And yeah, a lot of times when people are looking for help, they are focused on the micro steps. Myself and Dr. Reed have the advantage of being able to have witnessed whole journeys. And while we don't get a consistent payment every day to see a journey accomplished, just being in the place long enough to see an occasional journey get across the line, like you don't even understand what that actually means to us. And it's immeasurable, actually. It has nothing to do with data, has nothing to do with anybody's like expectations of what we're supposed to be doing here. When we can see real change that's happened in somebody's life, that's all the actual evidence we actually need. And I think that's what I heard Dr. Reed say when she said, being able to witness the change in people's lives. So starting out from a point where I can look at myself in the mirror and I can look at the people that we're serving, and without even somebody asking a question about what they need, being able to look at them deep enough from a point of view of knowing what I know and say, you know what, here's what you need, here's what you need, here's what you need. Let me also ask you if this is resonating with you. Let's talk and let me listen to you and make sure this is right. But just like in any good business, I think it was Steve Jobs that said, you got to think ahead of what the customer says they want. In our space, when we think ahead of what people are asking us for in addressing their needs, you begin to give people that kind of empowerment to find their own way through their journey. So Mike, when you said we don't work in hope, that's true, not in our everyday. However, hope is essential for somebody to reach past me. You coming to me to get today's issue addressed. You coming to us to get today's issue addressed. But we can't do anything by ourselves for you. We need to be able to be that partner, that point in the distance that as you're reaching for your goal, we're there to add that extra push. We're there to add that extra momentum. We're there to take that roadblock out the way. But it's your hope that keeps you pushing past us to that next stop and that next stop and that next stop. So it's all necessary. We need hope to stay alive. We need our resources to be there. We need to actually make sure we do what we say we're going to do and do it well for people. And most importantly, we need to let people know and make sure people understand. And we need to operate in a way so people get that there's nothing wrong with them. They're not broke. Ain't nothing wrong with you. Ain't nothing amiss. You just going through something just like everybody else goes through something. And it's my job to help you. It ain't nothing wrong with this. It ain't nothing. I'm not here to make you feel bad. Actually, it's my pleasure, my honor to be able to serve you. Right. And if we
don't owe you anything.
If we can do all that right, I think we can help a lot of people. And it's not us helping. It's not us fixing anything. It's us just being the proper stations in that journey that they're in order to help make sure that they're going to get to their goal.
That is very well put. Very well put. Dr. Reed, I know you have to come behind that, but he pivoted off of what you said, but what do you have to add to that?
I feel like you just gave a whole sermon, Kirk. I really do. So you said a lot of important things. And one thing that I definitely pulled out of everything that you said is that we have to have those elements of hope, action, and goals to see what we're looking for in the end result. So we need all of those things. And it can't just be this one-sided activity that takes place from our perspective, because that's our position. But it has to be something that is interchangeable in nature with the person, people, with the communities that we're working alongside of and supporting. So, again, it becomes this all-encompassing experience for anyone that comes in contact with us or our organization, because for us, it becomes a part of the cycle, right? Of making sure that those that are getting the support can see us as a resource to be shared with others who can then come in and potentially volunteer or do other kinds of things to continue the good work of A Forgotten Harvest, LTU. But Mike, I also want to take a step back. When you talked about biggest challenges and metrics. So from my side, because I'm in an institution of higher education, meeting the metrics is directly tied to accreditation, because accreditation bodies have said this is so important that we now need to see evidence that there's movement towards getting to equity. So you can no longer just talk about it. As we like to say, don't talk about it, be about it. So you have to show that you're actually making those moves towards the things that you said are important to the health of your institution, to the health of your programs. And when accrediting bodies say you need to do this, you listen. But at the same time, there are no shortcuts or quick fixes when it comes to equity and social justice. And you got to remember, for some people, talking about equity and equality and fairness, equity feels like oppression, especially if you've always gotten what you've always gotten because of who you are. And no one is saying to give up anything. We're asking that you see more than just your side. So with that being said, change is incremental at best. Change is slow, and sometimes we don't see the results right away. If anything, we will see in generations or decades that pass to show that we're actually making shifts towards where we're trying to go. Also, because people like to people, we are very uncomfortable with difficult conversations, and we are also push back on anything that will challenge our mindset, because what our lived experiences are, that's what colors how we do what we do, what it is that we do. And sometimes for some people, they have to have a break point where they have to adjust their lens. But for the most part, if people can pass the buck to give it to somebody else so that they can be the ones to solve the problem while they keep their hands up and say, well, I was a good person, that's challenging, because people are often dedicated to preserving that which have kept them comfortable, which have kept them in power. And sadly, it comes at the expense of other people. So we have to have those different conversations. We have to be able to move out of what's in it for me and into what's in it for the collective we.
So this is fantastic. We're rounding the corner very quickly here, and we're coming into our final questions. And so what I want to ask is, if you can both just give us a brief cliff notes, if you will, of how you arrived where you are, and then I want to open the floor up. And when we do open the floor up to questions, it probably may be more efficient to type them in the chat if you have a question. However, if you feel so compelled and you'd really like to come on camera to ask either Dr. Reed or Mr. Mayes a question directly, you can certainly do so. So with that, Kirk, I know a bit of your story. You don't arrive at Forgotten Harvest if it's not for Brightmoor. And if people don't know, Brightmoor was in a dire situation. You were a big part of that turnaround. But can you just give us a quick synopsis of how you arrived as the CEO of Forgotten Harvest?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And, I don't want to skip over the transition role, which was working in the mayor's office in Mayor Douglas' administration the first 6 months as the deputy for the economic development team. And arguably, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that role too, even though it was 6 months, right? So everything is necessary in the recipe, even the pinch of salt, right? I can first say that it wasn't a target for me. Again, it goes back to just really having the intent of being someone who can add value in the work that we were doing here in the community. And when I was in Brightmoor, there was a lot of things that needed to be addressed. And I think most importantly, what I was able to demonstrate in that role that I think was important for the consideration for me to be considered for this role was a track record of transparency, open communication. You might not like how or what I do, but you weren't going to get surprised. So there's a level of trust. And hey, man, I'm not bragging, but, results speak for themselves. And I've been able to be a part of projects or initiatives or, you name it, and be able to bring through some real results, right? So I have a track record of winning, but also carrying myself in a way that doesn't set me up to be able to be sabotaged by things that I shouldn't let get me caught up, right? So having the right kind of character in front of people when you're not in front of people, and a reputation that actually is marked with that type of character. I think I couldn't sustain any of this over that time though, if there wasn't also a commitment of being myself. And that's like being myself. So that's the gift and the curse of it all. Because at some point, somebody not gonna like you, right? But if you also have that other side of being able to deliver and being able to trust that you will be able to deliver for whatever that responsibility that you're given, then hey, the door can't be completely closed on you because, as they always say, good people are hard to find. So I think my whole journey has been a combination of me striving towards trying to do the best I can to serve my community, and also managing and maintaining a reputation and a brand of trustworthiness and productivity for our community. If you hopefully people know that when they call me, they can move forward with something. And
Well, you
the
did.
folks at Forgotten Harvest did the same thing.
Well, you definitely answered the call for us immediately for this initiative, so I definitely appreciate that. Everything you said, I can stand on. Your reputation is solid with everybody. Dr. Reed, how did you arrive where you are? And then we'll pivot pretty quickly because we do have our first question. I want to make sure I leave time for a few folks to get a few in.
Okay, sure thing. So I've often made the joke that we don't choose higher education chooses us. And that has definitely been my experience. I had to learn how to invest in myself. So going back and getting those additional degrees to expand my knowledge base so that my foundation would be solid. Also having numerous mentors and sponsors over the years, I mean years, decades, that have invested in my growth as a professional and as a scholar. I can honestly say that I would not be where I am if it wasn't for those people believing in me enough to take this road. And this road isn't always an easy one to take. There were times when I didn't know if I would have the resources necessary, but somehow things worked themselves out. I've had a number of exciting opportunities over the years to write and present and just dive deep, really deep into this work. So it's been a real commitment, but man, the outcome, like that's what just keeps me grounded in this work.
Fantastic. So we have our first question up here from Matthew Miller, and he says, thank you both so much for your insightful wisdom. His question is, generally or with a specific example, how have you found success in bringing in traditionally unengaged folks/groups into your work? The example being whether as participants, volunteers, or supporters. Kirk, you want to take that one first?
So when you say like unengaged, I'm assuming you mean people who aren't actively looking for or like actively working as a volunteer or actively informed about how we do what we do is what I'm assuming you're meaning?
Yeah, I think so. And when he says traditionally unengaged, right? Maybe there are groups of populations that historically and traditionally you can't get them involved, but somehow you found ways to engage those people. Do you have examples of that? You yourself, you said you were not the prototypical CEO.
Yeah. So
yes.
I think in short, and without, being able to specifically answer, but I would say in short, the big way that we get people engaged from outside of our space, one of the biggest tools is storytelling, helping people understand not only what we do, but story formats also give people a chance to relate to the granular details of the human experience that is wrapped up in about any and every mission, right? So if you can tell a good enough story about what you're doing, why it matters, and what the outcome is from all of that coming together, that's a great asset in being able to put somebody in front of that kind of experience, and potentially they find their own connections for whatever reason themselves, right? So for instance, there's people who are passionate and engaged folks in our space who weren't engaged at one point, but were walking around with all this real heavy interest in finding something that they could exercise because when they were a kid, they remember going through hunger, right? Or there's a cultural significance of addressing hunger. For instance, many people in the Jewish population that, you know, really helped start Forgotten Harvest are passionate about serving this mission because of the impact of hunger, or hunger's impact on people that went through the Holocaust, and the connections and the history that they still have within their family, of some of those family members who went through that, and that was kind of like connected to their demise, right? So there may be some folks who don't even really know how important this mission is to like their family, cultural, historical like passion. And sometimes by us like telling those stories, it helps to reignite the memory and the importance of getting involved. A lot of times you get people also who, from a charitable point of view, are going through their career and get to a place where they realize, hey, I can start giving back. And then they got to figure out where's the right place to go. So the storytelling does it, but also really having like your value proposition ready to go for those who care about the ROI and how do you do it and how much money are you spending on the core mission as opposed to your overhead and your administrative. You know, any question that I would say would be important to you as the person looking for that traditionally unengaged, the back of the mind and that kind of stuff is something that you should think about how you would best address it to a loved one or a stranger if they really were concerned about that answer. And the last thing I would say is invest some of that time and energy from this creative visioning process. And when you get through that, start putting together a frequently asked question sheet of a lot of all the different things that people come to you with, and put it out there, something that's really publicly available. And you'd be surprised how many people are walking around with these questions, and you can have an automated process where they heard about you, somebody said something about you, they came and went to your website, there were still questions, but there was an FAQ. You know what? I'm here now because I want to know more and I want to volunteer, or I want to give to you. And, you know, you got to keep on doing it. You got to keep on working it. And you got to keep on like being present in the conversation. And I think you get people on a daily basis. It just takes work.
Dr. Reed, you get the final word on this question. We're going to work hard to stay within. Our goal is always between 30 to 45 minutes and respecting people's time. You guys have been fantastic and really clearing your answers. Dr. Reed, you get to close us out before we say goodbye this afternoon.
Okay, so in 90 seconds or less, more like 60 seconds, just again, piggybacking off of Kirk, narratives matter. They absolutely matter. And the more that narratives are shared, the more people are able to see their humanity in others. So it stops being an us versus them and becomes, I see myself in the stories that they're telling because this was my experience. Also, I like to ask people, how would you solve the problem? Because there are individuals that will complain about things, not complain in that particular sense, but give their criticisms. And as opposed to just taking their criticisms, I will ask, well, how would you solve the problem? If you were in my seat and you were doing this work and someone brought this to you, how would you solve it? And as they are talking about the ways that they would solve it, I listen to them, but more importantly, I create accountability to incorporate those ideas into the work that's being done. I give them a job to do. And because they now have that accountability and because they now have skin in the game, that often will push them to participate, right? Because it's that participation that makes them see how important this work is.
Couldn't have said it better. That's a great way to close. If you all have additional questions, if we did not leave enough time for you all to ask questions, you can still leave them in the chat. And then also you all received email invitations to this. If you want to email, you can respond to the Michigan Community Service Commission if you have additional questions. Also, you have their folks. We'll make sure you have their information to both Mr. Mayes and Dr. Reed. If you all want to connect with them, if you want to collaborate, that's another reason we did this, is to do some knowledge sharing, best practices. And so with that said, this is our first time doing this, and this is exploratory, but I think we're on to something here And we really just appreciate all of you for taking time out of your day to hear from our first Fireside Chatters. So thank you, Mr. Mayes. Thank you, Dr. Reed. And thank you all for joining us. And hopefully you'll tell some of your colleagues and you'll continue to join us for the remaining Fireside Chats.
Thank you so